Hey, it's Mrs. Gibson here with step 3 of writing your research paper. So you have already gathered information and you have written commentary on it in that research slideshow. And then you have written your introduction and specified your thesis statement. So the next step is to delve in more depth with your first reason that you stated in your thesis statement. And the one that I'm working with for my example about Andy Warhol is that he has democratized art. And so he's done that in a couple different ways. And I'm going to think about this paragraph as almost like a little mini research paper just on one intensive topic. So the first thing that I need to do is start with a topic sentence that states my reason that he's influential. And then I need to build in key facts and details. And really it would be a good idea, since this is a research paper, not just like a 5-paragraph essay. It's still basically a 5-paragraph essay, but it's been blown up and like supersized. But I need to have reasons within my reasons. So let me start with the topic sentence and then I can get into my more specific reasons. Okay, I'm really tempted when I start a new paragraph to start off by saying one reason why, but I realize that that's a more elementary style of writing and I probably need to be moving past that at this stage in my schooling. So I thought about what that word democratize means, and I also thought it might be helpful to define it for my readers so they're not feeling lost as I get into this next part of my paper. So I looked up the word and I worked it into my topic sentence. It says, the word democratic has several different meanings. However, if one looks it up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the words relating to, appealing to, or available to the broad masses of people, and favoring social equality, not snobbish, can be found. One of the most lasting impacts Andy Warhol had on American culture is his democratization of art. Warhol accomplished this in several ways. Okay, so providing that definition, explaining that it applies to Warhol's art, and now I'm going to show how that's been influential. That's what's coming up next. I need to go back into my research and find something that I can cite that I can use to support my idea next. And I'm going to want to do that by working it into my own writing. I can't just pull something, copy and paste it, and hope that that's enough. It needs to be woven into my own writing. So that's what I've got to do next. So here I am at one of my sources. This is from artlife.com. And this particular article is about Andy Warhol's factory. This is the place where he had parties and created art, all different kinds, films and paintings. This set of paragraphs is really helpful to what I'm writing. I'm going to read it and decide what applies to this particular paragraph that I'm writing right now. It says, with their focus on mass production and consumerism, factories aren't things one would typically associate with art and creativity. However, considering the mechanical nature of Andy Warhol's pop art, this was a fitting name for his place of work. In opposition to the prevailing elitist connotations surrounding art, Warhol pioneered a more commercial production approach. He had no interest in creating pieces just for the wealthy, and instead targeted the masses by placing pop culture figures at the heart of his work, especially products and celebrities. This subject matter appealed to wider society and enabled him to target the masses. In theory, just as anyone could own any factory-made item, anybody could own a Warhol. Now, this is all really interesting right here, but it doesn't go along with the current topic that I'm writing about. It actually goes along with my third reason, which was about the subject matter of his paintings. So this would be a good place for me to come back to when I write that part. But right now, going on to this next paragraph and seeing if this helps me. It says the factory's name is even more fitting given the silk screening process by which Warhol actually produced his work. Rather than painting every piece by hand, he would simply transfer his stenciled designs, allowing him to reproduce a work multiple times and churn out prints at great speed. And prints weren't the only things created in the studio. As Velvet Underground co-founder John Cale told The Guardian in 2002, it wasn't called the factory for nothing. It was where the assembly line of the silk screens happened. While one person was making a silk screen, somebody else could be filming a screen test. Every day something new. Now, this is actually pretty helpful to me as far as that idea of inviting other people into the process of art making. You can see here that Warhol didn't do everything by hand himself. He actually delegated some of that responsibility to the people in his factory. So now I'm going to take that idea and I'm going to put it into my own writing, and I'm also going to quote this article so that I've got a source worked into my writing. So I've done some writing and I've done some color coding just to help you follow my thought process here. So if you look over here in the left-hand column, you can see that I've broken down my first key detail and fact into 3 parts: the context, the citation, and then making sense of this information for the reader. This process should look really familiar to you because it's what you do when you are analyzing literature. You are setting up the quote, you are embedding the quote in your writing, and then you're analyzing it afterwards. So you will see that here. Let me read to you what I have. With an incredible combination of talent and whimsy, Warhol was able to both control the images he made and invite the participation of others at the same time. His famous factory, the building in Chelsea where musicians, drag queens, and filmmakers all made art together, was the scene of mass productions of silk screen paintings. After Warhol made the initial stencil for a painting, he could allow others at the factory to help him with next steps. In fact, John Cale from the band Warhol managed, the Velvet Underground, commented, "One could view Warhol's assembly line approach firsthand because while one person was making a silk screen, somebody else would be filming a screen test." And there I have done an internal citation, an MLA internal citation. Let's just pause there for a second and take a look at what's going on here. First of all, going back to the website where this quote came from, you'll see that the quote is a bit longer than what I actually ended up using. And that's because I only want to take the kernel that is the most important and put it into my writing. The rest of the writing should be from my own brain. So you have background information about the process of the writing or of the making of paintings, but really I wanted to illustrate that other people were involved. So I took that bit and I plugged it into the writing in just that little bit. The other thing that I did was I took the URL and I went back to my citation machine, and when I asked it to make the citation for me, I told it that I wanted to copy the in-text citation this time. And so when you look here where it says Art Life, that is the way that the internal citation is supposed to be put into the writing. After the quotation mark, in parentheses, before the period. That's how you do it. Okay? So, moving on to the next bit that I have highlighted in green, I can't just plug in a quote and be like, okay, now I'm moving on. I need to tie it back to what I'm trying to convince my reader of, which is that Andy Warhol was a person of influence in American life. That's where I'm doing that next bit for my first fact. It says, some people can't imagine that an artist, especially a world famous one, would leave an aspect of the art-making process to another person to complete. What this says about Warhol is that he considered the involvement of others key to bringing his pieces to life. He made art production a communal experience in much the same way that today people attend Friday night painting parties or Saturday morning birthdays at a pottery place. So he was ahead of his time in that he understood that people like to participate in an art-making process. And in that way, he democratized, going back to my main idea, the production of art by involving other people in his process. So that's my first idea for this paragraph about democratization of art. My next idea is going to go on to how when he had an art installation in a museum, he sometimes left the way that the art was to be displayed to the person who was doing the installation. He let them decide how they wanted it displayed. Not all artists do that, but he involved other people again in that decision-making process. So what that next block looks like is just me setting up this blue, orange, green again, but with another fact. That's how you do this. And really, now that you've seen how that fits together, all that needs to happen at the end of that paragraph is a sentence that looks similar to the introductory sentence, but is simpler and kind of ties it all up. So now you have the meat of your paper writing. This is really what it needs to look like, and that's why this is the last step of the actual writing. And next we'll move on to citations for a works cited list.